Chapter 838. The shop assistant thought that the young man with the headband in front of him was a rich young master who had come to choose a game console. After introducing the console, he had other customers to attend to, but he didn't know that right after he left. The black-haired youngster with the headphones smirked. She took out a USB with her left hand and intervened without a trace. A dialog box popped up. It was a very small part, but the code was running nonstop. Z was best at hacking. It was the integration of resources. Thousands of computers around her worked for her at the same time. No matter who it was, the firewall of a commercial plaza wasn't very tight. It was vulnerable in front of a hacker. Hence, it wasn't difficult to infiltrate. The difficult part was to find traces of other intruders without being hunted down by others. This was the most profound hacking technique. Most people would choose to find an entry point from the surveillance room. But Bojo chose to avoid this point. She didn't stay in the surveillance room and directly controlled the cinema network. Some people said that if she infiltrated the cinema system, she would be discovered immediately. After all, the bar counter required tickets. Don't forget, there was something called the movie ticket collection machine. It was connected to the cinema network, and the cinema network was connected to the entire mall network. When the image unfolded, the youngster's long fingers on the keyboard suddenly sped up. The clicking sound was hidden in the hustle and bustle of the crowd. Even if someone heard it, they would think that someone was playing a game. Everyone who had been to a large computer experience store would know what it was like. Other than the sound of the keyboard, there was only the sound of the game. Moreover, with the popularity of Hero, no one could tell what she was up to. No one would notice the change in her gaze. Like a rising crow, she flew through the 3D map formed by the IP address and headed straight for the center. It was just an instant. The firewall was destroyed. The youngster's beautiful thin lips opened slightly. Let the hunt begin. Swoosh. The computer was operating at high speed. A couple who were collecting their tickets were puzzled. Why did the ticket collection machine in front of them suddenly stop working? They called the staff over. The staff took a glance and smiled. It's a malfunction. You can use the ticket collection machine at the side. But the one next door wasn't that effective. 5 ticket collection machines malfunctioned at the same time. The staff thought it was a network problem. After all, it only stopped working for a minute. A minute later, everything was restored. No one paid attention to the hall. Other than the special forces who had come here, anything abnormal at this time would be a problem. This had always been his principle. He pressed on his earpiece and said in a low voice, "Young master, there's a situation. The ticketing machine is malfunctioning. I suspect that someone is attacking the network." When Chinemo heard that, he typed 2 words with his fingers. Fatty. Fatty was a little flustered. After all, he was the one in charge of monitoring the abnormalities in the network. However, he said, there are no abnormalities in the surveillance room. Chinmo's eyes dimmed. His typing hand was beautiful, giving off an aura of abstinence. Nothing out of the ordinary is the biggest anomaly. Fatty, don't move, continue watching the surveillance. Wolf, find out which floor the electronic experience store is on. Don't use the mall's internet, ask someone. Use the most primitive method. The Special Forces soldier received the order and moved immediately. Chin-Emo sat on the spot, the coldness in his eyes at its lowest. Fatty didn't know that. At this moment, he had become Bojo's first target. The enter key rang. A page appeared on the screen in front of the youngster. The owner of the page was still watching the surveillance. He hadn't expected anyone to discover his location so quickly. When Bojo saw that face, she arched a brow. She didn't attack. Since they were from the same team, she wouldn't start a conflict at this time. Of course, more importantly, if she teased Fatty and alerted him, it wouldn't be worth it. But the Almighty was ruthless. Such a comprehensive surveillance. Was he trying to catch them all in one fell swoop? Bojo caressed the bridge of her nose, feeling slightly guilty. She glanced at the virtual IP settings in the mall, widening the search area. Her fingers moved swiftly, without any pause. The so-called network attack usually altered the original data. As long as she found the altered data, she would be able to find out the infiltration route. Of course, the most important thing was to hide. Bojo tapped her fingers, hiding her location at the center of the network. It was just like her character in the game, which had an invisibility ability. He could hide in the bushes without moving his expression. He wouldn't even appear on the map. But the moment he appeared, the damage would be off the charts. It was a nightmare for any player with low HP. Bojo had waited after the infiltration was successful. She hadn't followed the infiltration route. Just like Chin Mo. They both felt that this person would definitely have a backup plan. The Almighty wasn't the only one who liked to wait for someone to be captured. It was the same for her. Bojo leaned back in her chair. When her black hair fell, her lips curved upwards, a naughty smile that was pleasing to the eyes. The staff walked over. How is it? Isn't it very fast? Not bad, especially when it comes to capturing someone. It saves a lot of time, Bojo replied honestly. The staff glanced at the chat box on the screen. She was a true hero fanatic. She hadn't even opened the game page, and was still fantasizing about capturing someone. He wanted to ask more. Bojo arched a brow. Someone seems to be calling you. Business was indeed busy. The staff had no choice but to leave. Bojo glanced at the time displayed on the screen. There were still 20 minutes before the movie ended. Since the other party was imitating her intentionally, he must know that she liked to launch a surprise attack at the end of the movie. Let's see if the other party managed to imitate all of her techniques. Bojo smiled. She switched the page and glanced at the layout. She decided to be a support and send a message to the crime squad. Of course, she wasn't going to do it casually. If the other party could make some adjustments because of her support, her chances of escaping would be greatly increased. 10 minutes was enough for her to send a message. She was familiar with the police's procedures. First, she used her earpiece to record a conversation. Next, she used the virtual IP to connect to the internet phone. Ring, ring, ring. When the phone rang, the police station was still dealing with other matters. Hello. Just the sound alone was enough to tell how noisy it was. Bojo didn't reply. Instead, she clicked on the phone. The AIDS carrier's belongings have been removed from the locker. They are now stored in the potted plant at the exit of the theater. The voice was familiar. It was deep and cold, with an indescribable magnetism. When the police officer heard that it was evidence, he didn't dare to delay. He pushed the door open immediately. The police station had a lot of cases to deal with every day. The team leader was still in the middle of a civil mediation. The moment he heard AIDS carrier, his expression turned solemn. One had to know that this was the most important case in Rivertown so far. How did the call reach them? Without hesitation, the team leader ran over to the phone. After listening to the recording, he dialed Director Huang's number. Director Huang's eyes widened when he heard the important clue. It was important to note that such things were usually evidence. What he was most worried about now was the lack of evidence to arrest Yu Hongliang. But Director Huang wasn't stupid. What was the meaning of this call? Who is it? Director Huang asked. The team leader didn't waste any time, sending the recording over. Director Huang arched a brow when he heard the voice. What the F***ck? It sounded like young Master Qin's voice. No. He had to confirm it. Little Huang's heart was racing. He sent a WeChat message. There's a huge situation. He didn't reply for the first 10 seconds. In the end, there was only one word. Speak. The moment he saw the reply, Director Huang immediately pressed the call button. There was a call from the police station. They said that Yu Hongliang's stuff was stored in the storage cabinet, and it's now in the potted plant outside the theater. Yu Hongliang stored it? He didn't even know about it. This time, the person on the other end replied simply, MMH. MMH? That's it. Fortunately, just as little Huang was about to explode, a few more words were sent. A few more words appeared on the phone. Since it was delivered by someone, go and get it. Director Huang immediately replied. It wasn't you. The caller adjusted the voice, and it sounded just like you. Luckily, I was smart and didn't fall for it. When I found out about this, the first person I contacted was you. Qin Mo's eyes deepened. That fellow wanted you to inform me. He knew you would hear the recording. Given our relationship, Wouldn't he have sought me out for confirmation? Director Huang. This explanation actually made him feel stupid. Chinemo didn't have to think to know who had sent it. For example, a certain incompetent ticketing inspector. Indeed, the glacier seemed to be melting. But soon, a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Was he trying to lure her away? He would be playing right into her hands. There's no need to guard the air vent. Retreat. Retreat? Magician couldn't understand the situation. What's more, he didn't understand that they were basically playing psychological warfare. Sometimes it was normal for people on the same side to set traps. After all, one was escaping while the other was catching. In front of the computer, Bojio watched as the hunk guarding the ceiling left. Her lips curved upwards. It seemed like the Almighty had received her gift. But she wasn't sure if he liked it. She felt like a domineering CEO trying to please his new sweetheart. She was sincere, but if she didn't do it well, it would cause the other party's disgust. After all, beautiful people tended to have a temper. Her canine pet was just like that. From her heart, Bojio didn't want the Almighty to hate her. Chapter 839. But she didn't have to be too pessimistic. According to the Almighty's personality, he accepted the gift. It was probably because he didn't have any resistance towards the person who gave him the gift. Bojio glanced up. Now she just needed to catch him. Time was ticking by. At this moment, Yu Hongliang was the only one who was excited. He couldn't control himself anymore. For the third time, he glanced at the sixth seat on the seventh row. The moment he thought about the drug that was hidden there, enough to knock him unconscious. Naturally, that vivid image appeared in his mind. Some women were very playful. There were many lies. With a high status, everything they said was true. For example, this one. Yu Hongliang glanced at the photo that appeared in the chat app. It was obvious that the other party was rushing him. Handsome, where are you? I'm off work. I heard that you're going home. Can you give me a ride? Yu Hongliang wasn't afraid of exposing himself. With that person covering for him, he was at ease. He knew what kind of tricks a girl would fall for. He didn't say that he was in the cinema. Instead, he replied, I'm still in a meeting. I'll head out after the staff leave. As expected, the other party smiled. You're a boss. Yu Hongliang smiled. Just a vice president. The bait was released. Some girls were probably inexperienced or had a yearning in their hearts. Hence, they didn't even know how to think. A real vice president wouldn't have the time to let a girl hitch a ride. A real vice president wouldn't be chatting during a meeting. A real vice president would be like Feng Yi, thinking about the development of the company 24/7. Usually, they wouldn't have the time to flirt. Not to mention chatting with someone on this kind of unknown dating app. If they wanted to find someone to sleep with, they wouldn't even be interested in a line of young models. Hence, from the very beginning, when people put themselves in danger, it was often because of greed that caused mischief. The girl didn't realize it was a trap. Instead, she was happy that such a rich person was coming to fetch her. Perhaps, something romantic might happen. 10 minutes before the movie ended. Right at this moment, a computer in the gymnasium on the third floor suddenly emitted a different sound. It was an alarm. An alarm from the firewall that Bojio had set up. Of course, this firewall was different from the one in the cinema. It would only be used for monitoring purposes and wouldn't have any defensive capabilities. In other words, he wouldn't be discovered by the intruders. When Bojio heard that voice, her dark eyes lit up. His fingers began to rapidly write code on the keyboard. Every code was used to decipher the opponent's strength. At this moment, the opponent would not notice anything strange. This was Z's true tactic. 100 miles away, in a large internet cafe, another person was attacking. The method of imitation was very obvious. She had read all the previous information about Z. Creating a diversion was the enemy's best tactic. Row 7, seat 06 was a small alarm that she had imitated Z. The news was just a test. If the person sitting in row 7 seat 06 was not called out, that meant that the theater was safe, and they could act as usual. It was the most convenient way to use a network attack to investigate this information. At the same time, it could also detect the location of all the members of the key case investigation unit. Chapter 840. After Rao Rong received the message, he typed a full stop and sent it to Yu Hongliang. It meant that the surroundings were safe. Yu Hongliang's eyes lit up with excitement. Since it was safe, he could have more fun today. Yu Hongliang couldn't wait any longer. If it wasn't for that person's reminder, he would have waited for the movie to end. He wanted to stand up and leave. But there were only 5 minutes left. The girl in the internet cafe watched her meticulously set up everything, the joy on her face obvious. Especially when she saw the people from the key case investigation unit playing this and that in the surveillance room. The corners of her mouth curled up even more. What was the point? Yu Hongliang just had to bend over in the crowd, and he would be able to take it away. From such an angle, it wouldn't be captured by the surveillance cameras. As for the people guarding the entrance, they thought they were in the right place. In reality, they were all wrong. As for the surveillance cameras, she just had to attack them. The girl moved her fingers, as though the entire situation was in her hands. The internet cafe provided lunch. When the auntie came over to ask if she needed anything, the girl glanced at the auntie impatiently, her voice cold. "It's fine, stay away from me." The auntie paused, feeling slightly awkward but didn't say anything. Nowadays, people in their 20s were indeed like that. It wasn't rare to bump into one or two of them every day. She turned and continued asking the next person. The girl moved her fingers, adjusting the original footage. Her gaze was filled with disdain. She adjusted her state and pressed the code. Her next target was the surveillance camera in the corridor of the cinema. She inserted the video she had prepared to cover today's surveillance camera. The video contained the footage of Yu Hongliang watching a movie. Yu Hongliang hadn't left immediately after the movie. Instead, he had stayed for 2 hours in the jewelry shop. She just had to show it to the crime squad. Since Yu Hongliang's car hadn't moved, they would definitely assume that Yu Hongliang hadn't left. It was a perfect plan. After the girl conquered the surveillance room, the smile on her face deepened. She started to try to take control of the surveillance room. It took some time, but it wouldn't take long for the girl to destroy the firewall. In the cinema, Qin Mo glanced up. Behavior could often express a person's heart. He could see the state of Yu Hongliang, who was sitting in front of him. He was anxious and excited. Otherwise, he wouldn't have picked up his phone to check the time again. This was a unique behavior that some criminals displayed when they were about to commit a crime in a serial murder case. Qin Mo's fingers moved slightly. There was less than a minute before the concert ended. He sent 2 words in the group chat. Those 2 words were just like him, noble and domineering. Real in the net. The Special Forces soldier was the first to act. He found the person in charge of the cinema and handed over his ID. He only said one sentence: "We need your company's cooperation." It was finally the end of the movie. Some people still wanted to see more. The clip was already out. Chapter 841. It was a magnetic voice. However, there was a phenomenon in the cinema. When there were a lot of people before the staff finished speaking, there would be people who would stand up and leave. Rao Rong sat at the outer perimeter. Seeing that everything was going smoothly, he kept his phone and followed the crowd out without anyone noticing. Yu Hongliang stood up. He couldn't wait any longer. He walked down 2 rows, heading towards row 7, seat 06. At this moment, Rao Rong had already left the cinema. He didn't know that Qin Mo was in the same theater as him. Rao Rong didn't notice, and Yu Hongliang didn't know that the moment he lifted his foot, the person behind him had already followed him. That was how the game was played. People often said that the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Many people thought they were the oriole, but in reality, they were just the mantis. Once the movie ended, this meant that it was time to decide the outcome of the battle. Those who played mind games usually had to do with patience and adaptability. In the large internet cafe, the girl was still doing the video implantation. But at this moment, she suddenly sensed something was amiss. Why was there an extra firewall here? Hackers attacked each other. Some might not have seen it before. The girl narrowed her eyes, wanting to free her hand to tell Rao Rong to cancel the event. But the person on the other end didn't give her the chance. The wave of attacks destroyed the video she had implanted. The girl pressed her fingers on the keyboard. No matter who the other party was, They were courting death. She couldn't bear to see her plan destroyed just like that. She started the virus backlash program. The computers around the internet cafe started operating. Chat boxes kept popping up on the screen. Just by listening to the sound of typing, one could tell that this was an online battle without gunpowder. The incident in the cinema wasn't over yet. Fatty was shocked by the scene in front of him. He was a hacker and knew what the firewall was reacting to. More importantly, what was the meaning of the red dot? Was it luring the other red dot over, hiding behind him and letting the other party attack him? Wait a minute, there were 2 red dots. This meant that there were 2 IPs invading at the same time. F***CK. Young Master had asked him to check the internet for any abnormalities. But he had never been told which side he should help if there were 2 intruders fighting. No. The current situation was completely not a matter of whether he helped or not. What was the meaning of the red dot behind his IP address? Did he think he was playing hero? Did they think he was a tank? What the hell, letting him charge first. He did not move. Right under the tower. Young Master said not to act without orders. We really don't have any chemistry. In the experience store, Bojo reached out to play with her headband, her right hand moving the mouse. She couldn't help but shake her head. If she had teamed up with the Almighty, she would have taken him down long ago. It was no wonder Fatty hadn't made it into the starting lineup. Fatty looked at his computer. He had an inexplicable feeling that the red dot that had circled around him and then suddenly rushed out, as if it was mocking him. Was it an illusion? Fatty pinched his arm, came back to his senses, and quickly made a call. Chapter 842. If Boju knew that Fatty was making such a call, she would definitely say, "You look more like a fish." In the cinema, Chinemo listened to the voice from the earpiece. His calm eyes darkened for a moment. 2 fishes. One was the mastermind behind this case. It was obvious who the other one was. But Chinemo didn't say a word. He continued walking forward like an audience member, his deep gaze landing on Yu Hongliang, who wasn't far from him. Yu Hongliang wished that time would pass faster. Why were there so many people in front of him? Couldn't they move faster? Could they afford to waste his fun time? He tugged his collar, his eyes almost popping out. He saw that he was almost at his destination. He squeezed forward, taking the chance to bend down and pick up the bag. Such actions weren't out of place in the cinema. Since everyone was busy leaving, no one would care about what he was doing. Yu Hongliang knew very well what was inside this beautifully packaged bag. It wasn't easy to get something to liven things up, and it had a knockout effect. Jiang City had always been strict. Especially recently, he didn't know what was going on. They had put in a lot of effort to rectify the situation. Hence, it was difficult for him to buy these things. Fortunately, God was on his side. He was chosen by that person to become the pioneer to eliminate sins. Unclean things would be eliminated. That was what he wanted to do. Next, the hunting game began again. Yu Hongliang watched as his phone lit up. He lowered his head and typed, "I'll be." Before he could type out the word, he saw a person standing at the front of the row, with one hand in his pocket, blocking his way. Yu Hongliang lifted his head. He had an impression of this person, mainly because of the scar on his face. "Excuse me." Yu Hongliang didn't take the other party seriously. He didn't like people interrupting or even delaying him when he was doing something. But the next second his expression changed. Because of the person's voice. "Mr. Yu Hongliang, right?" That person's voice was very indifferent, with a kind of condescending tone. It was like an aura that could only be cultivated over the years. Yu Hongliang wasn't dumb. At this time, for a stranger to call out his full name, it was obvious that something had happened. Yu Hongliang shuddered and wanted to run away. Qin Mo didn't chase after him. Instead, he slowly walked down the row. It was precisely because of this man's actions. Only then did Yu Hongliang feel even more pressured. Compared to the other party's nonchalance, his panic made him look like a mouse that was jumping around randomly. He was completely unaware that he was trapped in a glass cage. Yu Hongliang panicked and wanted to force his way out while there were still people watching, who knew that just as he raised his fist, before he could even get close to that person's body, he was kicked half a meter away by that person. Clang! When Yu Hongliang's back hit the seat, he felt a piercing pain in his heart. He really did not expect that his opponent would be defeated in one move. This kind of noise was bound to cause panic. Everyone turned to look at Qin Mo. The staff immediately picked up the headset and hurriedly said, "Security, security. There's a fight going on in Hall 6. Help." It was a chaotic scene. Some of the girls even screamed when they saw Qin Mo beating them up. Yu Hongliang wanted to escape since the situation was out of his control. Maybe the people watching the movie could help him. But it was a pity that Yu Hongliang met Qin Mo. Yu Hongliang watched as the man stood in the crowd, saying, "Police are on a case, leave the venue to the left." In an instant, the atmosphere changed. There was a huge empty space between him and the man. When the man walked towards him, Yu Hongliang didn't sense the presence of a police officer. Instead, he felt like prey trapped by a devil. He couldn't break free. It was impossible for Rao Rong, who had just walked out of the hall, to not notice the panic. His first reaction was that something had happened. It wasn't wise to turn back. He wanted to leave as soon as possible. But before he could walk out of the theater, a crime squad member, who was checking something at the exit, stopped him. "Apologies, sir. Due to your seat, please follow us." Rao Rong's fingers tightened in his pocket, his face expressionless. "Seat? I don't know where I lost my ticket. I need to check it." The crime squad member didn't reply directly. "Follow us and you'll know." Rao Rong didn't resist. It would be a sign of guilt. Instead, he raised his hand, speaking to the crime squad member. "I play esports. Can I call my team member? We have agreed to train together tonight. I'm afraid he might be anxious." "Apologies, I'm afraid not." The crime squad member took a step forward. Rao Rong smiled faintly, keeping his phone. "All right then." He put his phone away because he noticed that he wasn't the only one under suspicion. The police had stopped the others as well. The other party had said it was because of the seat. Rao Rong narrowed his eyes. What exactly was it that made him a suspect as well? The person in row 7, seat 06, had already left. Wait, could it be? From the very beginning, the bait and alarm that they had thrown out had already been seen through. The commotion was heard. The Special Forces soldier was the first to rush into the theater. Behind him was the person in charge of the theater. When the staff saw their boss, they kept their earphones, believing that it was really the police. The Special Forces soldier walked over to Qin Mo, speaking in a low voice, "Young master." Qin Mo's gaze was calm. "I'll leave this person to you. Send him along with the evidence to Director Huang for an hour. Don't let him interfere with the interrogation. We'll talk about it when I arrive." "Yes." The Special Forces soldier wanted to say something, but his boss turned, tugging on his suit jacket as he walked towards the exit. He looked as though he was going to settle someone, his entire body exuding a murderous aura. Honestly speaking, he had never seen his young master in such a hurry, although it wasn't obvious from his gait. His left hand was holding onto his phone. It was obvious that if there wasn't a criminal for him to catch, boss would have left a long time ago. The boss had left a long time ago. Why would it wait until now? The Special Forces soldier wondered why his young master was suppressing his anger. He had never liked to take action, but now, he had sent the suspect to the ground with a single kick. It was better to just gossip in his heart. He definitely wouldn't ask. Chapter 843. Yes. Coyote himself was on the 3rd floor. He was the fastest to act. Fatty was still hesitating. He looked at the 2 red dots that triggered the alarm. He really didn't know if he should intervene or not. Don't intervene. His hands were itching to just watch. If he intervened, who should he help? From Fatty's point of view, the red dot closest to him seemed a little weak. It didn't seem as strong as the one opposite him. But that wasn't a reason for him to intervene. He didn't forget that the red dot seemed to have mocked him just now. Don't intervene. Stay under the tower. In the internet cafe, the girl looked at the data that she gradually broke down. Her lips curled up, overestimating themselves. They still wanted to catch her. She wanted to see who would be the one to catch who. The girl's fingers flew across the keyboard, as if she was torturing someone. This made her sweet face have an expression that a girl like her shouldn't have. It seemed to be twisted, but it wasn't. She hated everyone who interrupted her plan. For example, the current situation. Not only did they ruin her carefully prepared video, they also made her miss the opportunity to leave clues. She was supposed to leave those traces of the imitation of Z to the police. Now the girl narrowed her eyes. She was going to destroy the other party's computer. Even as a bystander, Fatty's computer sent out a warning. Not to mention the firewall of the cinema. In fact, once the network here completely collapsed, even the elevator would be out of service. Because in today's society, the operation of everything couldn't be separated from the network. In this case, it would be very difficult for the crime squad to take the corresponding person away. The monitoring network had already begun to be affected, and all the video screens had turned white. If the entire mall's network collapsed, Fatty didn't dare to imagine that situation. This wasn't just an Eastport scene. It was also the most prosperous area in Jiang City. During such a holiday, many children and old people would be shopping with their families. It was past 7 in the evening. It was the busiest time. If something were to stop operating, it would definitely cause everyone to panic. And everyone knew what panic meant. Children and old people would be squeezed around. A stampede was Fatty's instinctive reaction. However, the one that was attacking them did not seem to care about this at all. It was as if it was willing to send the entire mall to hell with it to complete this victory. At this moment, Fatty didn't think about whether he should intervene or not. In his eyes, this person was simply hateful. A real hacker shouldn't be like this. Just as he was about to press the keyboard to stop that person, the computer couldn't keep up. It could even be said that because of the cyber attack, it had become very slow. F***CK. Fatty's hand slammed on the keyboard. The girl in the internet cafe was still smiling. According to the current situation, something must have happened to Yu Hongliang. He might as well take the opportunity to attack the mall's system. Not only would it allow Rao Rong to leave without leaving any traces, it would also erase all the loopholes. Most importantly, rumor had it that Z always did things this way. Every time he appeared, he would let others know that he had been here before. If that was the case. Chapter 844. The girl's mind was deep, even though she looked harmless. Inside, there seemed to be a dark river flowing. Yu Hongliang was just a tool to her. Although it was useful. But it was just child's play. She and Rao Rong came first to see how the crime squad was doing. It was obviously improving. But this improvement wasn't enough to threaten her. Let Z appear in the world. All the focus would be shifted. It was perfect for such an occasion. When the internet was down and everyone was in a panic, it would be Z's declaration of war against the police. Wasn't it a perfect plan? The girl laughed, her gaze frighteningly cold as she launched a new wave of attacks. It was to crush the other party and destroy the internet in the shopping mall. Right now, Fatty wished he had a computer with him. But in reality, this problem couldn't be solved. The so-called internet attack was the spread of a virus. Although the red dot that mocked him was a little weak, the red dot that he was fighting against was a little weak. Fatty hoped that a miracle would happen. That person would be able to hold on and not be bitten to death. 7:15 p.m. The crime squad hadn't finished recording all the names on the list. Except for the cinema. The people on the other floors were still enjoying their holiday time. Especially the restaurants on the 6th floor, almost all of them were full. It was normal to queue up for a meal in Jiang City. The sound of children playing could be heard. Everything seemed so beautiful. They didn't notice the approaching danger. It wasn't that there wasn't any danger. Instead, many people would get rid of the danger when it came. The crime squad wouldn't affect the other floors when they caught someone. Even Chinmo's actions were the same. Perhaps many people would say that this place wasn't good, that place wasn't good. But China had a peace that no other country had. The peace came from the people who fought against the dark forces, but never spoke up. The laughter in the shopping mall grew louder. More and more sweat appeared on Fatty's forehead. It was too late to evacuate the crowd. He didn't even have time to inform his young master. A hacker usually wouldn't last more than 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Even if his young master knew about it, how was he going to evacuate? Fatty scratched his head and decided to make the call. Young master, The other party intends to destroy the entire network operating system of the mall. My computer can't run anymore. The worst-case scenario is that once the other party succeeds, the entire mall will lose all network control and power supply. There will definitely be panic. The best-case scenario is that the other person is resisting, but there is a difference, which means that the other person will be bitten to death by the other party. Hearing this, everyone who was moving stopped in their tracks, whether it was the man codenamed Wolf, the special forces, or the magician who was good at disguise. These people were all from the army. The bravery of a soldier had never changed, and that was to protect. After hearing such news, the special forces soldier clenched his fists tightly, raising his head abruptly. Young master. Chapter 845. Yes. The special forces soldier's eyes lit up when he received the order. He turned to report the situation to the person in charge. The person in charge's expression froze. He hurried to the broadcasting room, making use of the time he could still do something to broadcast the news. The entire process took less than a minute. The entire shopping mall, the places that were originally playing music, turned silent. This included the restaurants, cafes, and the entire plaza. Everything became very quiet at this moment. A gentle voice came next. Bojio wasn't wearing earphones at the Electronic Equipment Experience Center on the 3rd floor. Hence, she could hear the contents of the broadcast clearly. After hearing that, the corners of her mouth curled up. It was a very good idea. She would give everyone a charity event that would save energy to calm them down. That way, when the power went out, they wouldn't panic and cause harm. She had to admit that the Almighty was as wise as ever. It was a good idea. But she wouldn't let that happen. When Bojio glanced up, her fingers were still tapping slowly on the keyboard. She could adapt to the darkness, but that didn't mean everyone could. The goal of a hacker was not to bring those things to ordinary people. At this moment, the person in charge of the shopping mall was tormented. He knew that the idea in front of him was indeed a good one. But once the power went out for more than 10 minutes, anyone in the situation would feel uneasy. Especially in a place like the shopping mall. That was human nature. They could survive the first 10 minutes, but what would happen after that? Even if there was an emergency passageway, it wouldn't be good. No, it should be because there was an emergency passageway in the shopping mall. Once there was darkness, everyone would run towards the emergency passageway. When that happened, who would listen to others and walk slowly? No one would. If everyone would listen, there wouldn't be so many stampedes. The person in charge wiped the sweat off his forehead. He picked up his phone but didn't know who he should call. He thought that cyberterrorism was something that only appeared in movies. But when it actually happened, the person in charge finally understood how uneasy it was. Is that all? Don't we need to do anything else? The Special Forces soldier glanced at him. His gaze filled with an indescribable determination. Someone is doing it, don't worry. The person in charge stilled, not saying a word. Now he believed that there was no such thing as peace and prosperity in this world. Instead, there were people carrying burdens. As long as he saw the army green, he would feel a sense of security. Perhaps such a feeling could only be felt in Huaxia. In the past, he had always listened to it, so he hadn't been able to feel it. Chapter 846. Time passed bit by bit. Fatty was still pulling his hair and refusing to let go. He was really worried that the entire network would collapse in the next second. The girl in the internet cafe had already tasted the sweetness and her eyes darkened. How would that person deal with such a big feast? She raised her right hand, as though she was about to press the space bar to deliver a fatal blow. But in the next second, the girl's eyes suddenly widened. It was as though something had happened. Her fingers were typing rapidly. Where? How is that possible? That guy was here just now. The crack thing was actually useless. This was impossible. How is this possible? Fatty, who had been watching the battle, was also shocked. He couldn't believe his eyes. One of the red dots that was supposed to be emitted by the firewall suddenly disappeared. It wasn't an attack. Did it disappear on its own? Was it planning to retreat? No, that wasn't right. No matter how powerful the hacker was or how fast he retreated, there would always be traces left on the network. It was just a matter of whether one could track it or not. But this one was completely different. If it wasn't for the fact that the timing wasn't right, Fatty would really want to ask how exactly it was done. He looked at the screen and licked his lips nervously. The attacker was also looking for that person. It was the feeling of knowing that the other party was nearby, but not knowing where he was or when he would appear. Wait a minute. Fatty paused. Why did he feel that this situation was so familiar? Where had he seen such a situation before? Fatty knocked on his head. On the third floor, the youngster was sitting in front of the computer. Her hands were nimbly typing on the keyboard. The constantly moving screen reflected the youngster's face. Her black hair was tied with a headband, and she looked indescribably evil. She looked a little like a rich young master. Her chiseled side profile and white-pointed chin were very prominent at this moment. Click, click, click. The rhythmic tapping sounded as though she was planning an attack. Many people around the youngster began to discuss because of the broadcast. Someone asked, "What's going on? Is the power going to be cut off?" Even some people who were playing the game stopped what they were doing, including the primary school students who were wearing VR glasses. They were also in the queue. There would be a lot of voices coming from all sides. Some people and some decisions were made to protect the public. He would still say, "What's the situation? Why is it so troublesome?" But if only think of those who don't deserve it. You'll miss out on the people who deserve it. Such a thing. Bojo knew this better than anyone. It could be said that such an environment was not conducive to online hunting, because the moment would interrupt her thoughts. But it did not stop, no matter what kind of sound came from the surroundings. Understanding, not understanding, pretending to understand but denying the practice, or directly criticizing. Those who lived in comfort would not necessarily be able to experience this comfort. In the end, who would be the one to carry what would be brought to them? Bojo was different from the Almighty. She treated people differently, but there were some things she had to do. Maintain the original order. No innocent people involved. Protect the lives of others. This was a hacker's code of conduct. If the other party didn't even understand this point, in that case, this person wasn't fit to be a hacker. What's more, it was a hacker pretending to be her. Chapter 847. The sound of the keyboard finally sped up. It was completely different from before. Even when the youngster raised his hand, his slender fingers seemed to be able to shake out a shadow. If the sound of the keyboard just now was a slow movement, then now it was like a piano piece reaching its climax. The blade that flowed like water was raised. Fatty watched as the red dot suddenly appeared, like an eagle spreading its wings. Without any warning, it directly pierced through the opponent's heart. In the internet cafe, the girl's expression changed. This time, it was really twisted. She typed on the keyboard, trying to avoid such a fatal wound. But it was useless. The spread of the network virus hit the center. All her escape routes seemed to be blocked. She couldn't get out at all. How could it be? When she came in, there was no defense in this place. In such a short period of time, even she couldn't create a firewall on the spot. The girl bit her lip, an unprecedented black mist bursting out of her eyes. Unless, before she infiltrated, all these firewalls existed. But they were hidden. Just like the red dot just now. She deciphered an address and thought it was real. But in fact, it was just the first point of the opponent. The girl's eyes trembled. At this moment, she seemed to realize something. He didn't hesitate to destroy one of the networks just to retreat. But he couldn't retreat. All the weaknesses in the previous attacks were a disguise. But why did he disguise it? Was it to capture her? There was a saying that one would only see what they saw from different angles. As a bystander, if Fatty didn't understand why the red dot circling around him would wait until now to increase its hand speed, then now he completely understood. This person wasn't weak. It wasn't that he couldn't defeat the opponent. But if there was no firewall set up in the situation, any network attack would destroy the mall's network. On the surface, the red dot seemed to be resisting the opponent's attack. In fact, it was far more than that. The most important thing was the firewall that even he didn't know when that guy had built. The firewall that protected the entire mall's network. Those who hadn't conducted network attacks might not understand. If he had to make an analogy, it was like when the flames of war were coming. That person did not evade all of the enemy's attacks, which resulted in his battle robe being burned by the surging artillery fire. The shadow that existed on the network stood up with the support of the long sword. The shopping mall behind him was covered by a protective shield because of his actions, so it would not be destroyed by anything. That person stood in front of the shopping mall like a god of war. He raised his sword and charged forward. He was so fierce that he wouldn't lose to anyone. At that time, Fatty was shocked. Everyone knew what had happened to him. In the past, he really didn't know anything other than computers. He didn't have any education or looks. All he did was play games, run errands, and repair computers. If young master hadn't found him, perhaps he would always be like this. He still remembered that at that time, his young master was just a high school student. He was a very cold person, but he only told him one sentence. I have never been a hacker before, but I feel that the value of a hacker should not be like this. No matter what industry it is, the truly strong will not harm the people around them. A true hacker will use attack techniques to defend and maintain order in the virtual world. I hope you can do the same in the future. Fatty always remembered this sentence. But when he actually saw someone do it, the shock in his heart was indescribable. He stood in the darkness to defend against attacks from all directions. Fatty decided to tell his young master about this. He had to tell him. Hence, when he spoke, his words were a little incoherent. Young master, that red dot that mocked me, it doesn't seem to be a bad one. It's amazing. Not only did it create a new firewall to cover the entire shopping mall's main network, it is also tracking the attacker. Do you think I should try fighting it? It can even turn invisible. Do you know that? It's really sick and handsome. Chin Mo listened to Fatty's description without a change in expression. He gestured to the people around him. He was already at the entrance of the third floor, his eyes deep. She was very handsome, sitting at the innermost part of the experience store, especially when the corners of her mouth curled up as she typed. In contrast, the girl sitting in the internet cafe was sitting there. Not only did her expression change, but as the attack came, it also changed. That jumpy chat box was no longer under her control. The operation of the computer was starting to crumble under such attacks. If there was a sound from the network, there would definitely be a crackling sound. It followed the current and attacked the opponent's motherboard. Everyone knew that the core of a computer was the motherboard. Once the motherboard was destroyed, it meant that the phone would be scrapped. A virus attack, a professional virus attack, once the operating speed couldn't keep up, the motherboard could easily be destroyed. There was a loud bang. The girl's right hand that was holding the mouse slammed heavily onto the computer table. The loud sound immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding people. The players turned around in shock. When they saw that the person who had smashed the mouse in anger was actually a girl, they exchanged glances. What's going on? I don't know. Why did her computer screen turn black? Who am I supposed to ask? I say, you bunch of pigs, can't you smell anything? Of course I'm hungry. I really want to eat black pepper beef today. That's why I can smell a nice pepper smell. I'll order this when we go for the hero instance dungeon later. What the F***CK, the pepper smell is from the motherboard, the computer's motherboard is burnt pig. With such a shout, this caused everyone's attention to be focused on the girl. The girl's eyes were very dark, but her face was covered by her long hair, so people couldn't see her expression clearly. But just the aura emanating from her body made people feel that it was both sweet and gloomy. It was really very strange. Of course, the boss of the internet cafe had to come over after such a big incident. At this moment, the girl moved. Leaving this place immediately was the most important thing for her to do. Even if the motherboard was destroyed, at least her position wasn't exposed. But was it really not exposed? The girl had just stood up when she heard a cry of surprise coming from the entire internet cafe. What's going on? Where's my game screen? What's the meaning of this? The mouse isn't even moving. Our team is still in the dungeon and getting the first kill. Don't trick me, bro. Hearing that, Chapter 848. All the screens on the row of computers she was in had stopped working. Only 3 words appeared on them. Is it fun? The girl froze. Her fists tightened. She had been discovered? How could it be? Who exactly was it? Who exactly was it? On the 3rd floor of the mall, Boju lifted her thin lips. Successful hunt. She didn't need to explain anything. Fatty watched helplessly as the viruses were eliminated one by the defense system. He was extremely agitated, wishing he could go up and fight with the other party. Only Hoshino frowned as he sat beside the floor-to-ceiling window. He kept making calls until finally, someone picked up. He didn't waste any time, his gentle voice carrying his usual calmness. Someone went to the 3rd floor. There are the most people on the east and west sides. There's something wrong with the air vent. Bojo arched a brow. She held onto her phone and was about to stand up when she caught sight of the Special Forces soldier walking over. Her gaze deepened. Leave first, I'll think of something. Hoshino glanced up, his gaze as clear as jade. Z, we both know that even if young Master Fu's identity is suspected, Chinemo wouldn't be sure it's you. No one would expect someone to turn into someone else. Why did you change your plan and leave now? You like to play games, right? Bojo paused, but before she could reply, Hoshino's voice came over again. If it's because of other reasons, it isn't worth it to give up on something you like. Regardless of what happens, even if there are some things you can't change, as an international MVP professional player, I can tell you that Supreme Alliance isn't a match for Xiangnan without you. Bojo's fingers stilled. Hoshino glanced at the lights outside the window. Let's go back after the National League. I know you won't be satisfied until the competition is over. I want to compete now. Bojo glanced at the carpet searching the building. I'm afraid I won't have the chance. Hoshino heard the gloomy sigh and laughed. There's a Supreme Alliance uniform under the seat you're sitting on. Bojo's eyes lit up. Wear it if you like it. Hoshino flicked open the pack of cigarettes. You've always been smarter than me. I believe you should have an idea of how to escape now. Bojo smiled. The IP address will be transferred. You can leave but Ben will stay. I will send the virus removal program to you. Once it's done, the program will automatically collapse. Fatty has been guarding for so long, he has to give the other party a location. All right. Hoshino stood up. The knitted sweater he was wearing always gave people a sense of breathtaking cleanliness. Especially when he stood up, took his coffee cup, and left from the high chair beside the floor-to-ceiling window. Many girls turned back to look. However, no one could see that the black hair fell in an instant, covering his eyes. However, the corners of his mouth were curved into a smile. There was such a person. The reason why it became a special existence. It wasn't just liking. Somehow he wanted to play a game with Z. Even if they weren't in the same team. It didn't matter. This was Hoshino's deepest feeling after watching Supreme Alliance's entire match. If there was anyone in this world that shouldn't be let down, that was when that person shouldered something that ordinary people couldn't. Chapter 849. The search on the 3rd floor was still ongoing, with people standing at every exit. When Chin Emma walked over, he reached out to remove the scar on his face. His imposing handsomeness washed over them. The crime squad didn't bother looking at him. But even so, the people in the vicinity could feel the formless coldness. Criminology experts weren't something they could understand. Some of them weren't from the same generation as Chin Mo. She wasn't sure how this young Master Chin, who had the air of a business elite, suddenly became a criminologist. Director Huang had even used a special method to hand over all of their operations to him, giving him full authority over them. Some of them hadn't been assured at the start. They had been through fire and water, through many cases to come out. But the person in front of them was of noble birth. Would he know how to handle cases? They admitted that was their first impression. But just now, they found out that all the suspects had been pinpointed through this person's psychological profiling. That wasn't all. They had never encountered such a situation before. The moment the suspect moved, he was caught red-handed by the witness and evidence. He seemed to be able to predict everything. He was indeed a little godly. It wasn't that they hadn't interacted with criminology experts before, but there weren't many like him. They couldn't even understand his actions. Compared to arresting people, the man looked more like he was taking a stroll. His left hand was stuffed into his trouser pocket, his deep gaze sweeping across the area, attracting many heads. Just as Chinemo was about to enter the next experience store, the earpiece on his left ear rang again. It was Fatty again, sounding excited. "Boss, it's safe." Not only did that person secure the mall's network, but he also took the opportunity to hack into the other party's computer. Just now, when the other party wasn't paying attention, I traced the IP address. This person is now in the cafe on the second floor. I think he's cleaning up the remaining network viruses. Second floor? Chinemo arched a brow. Fatty was still excited. MH. Fatty. Chinemo pressed down on his earpiece, his black hair falling down, his voice flat. Do you think your hacking skills are better or the other party's? Fatty was humble. I'm not as good as the expert yet. Therefore, there's only one possibility for you to be able to trace the other party's IP address. That is, the expert you speak of deliberately left an opening for you. With that, Chinemo turned his head, his eyes filled with indifference. Don't leave the third floor. Arrange for a team to head to the cafe on the second floor. When Fatty heard this, he was immediately puzzled. If the expert really did it on purpose, that would be too cunning. He wanted to use the information he gave to lure the young master away. How could they be so shameless? The facts proved that Fatty was still thinking too little. Bojo had never expected such a simple diversion to divert the Almighty's attention. After several exchanges with the Almighty, she knew very well that these moves were useless in front of the Almighty. She did all this just for the time difference. Because she was very clear. On the third floor, every exit was guarded. Even if she could change her appearance, it would be very difficult for her to pass through the layers of checks. Not to mention that she was sitting in a computer experience store. They would definitely find her. Since this was the case. Chapter 850. Beside Bojo, the staff was still holding on to the mouse. He stretched his neck to look outside, wondering what was going on. First, the mall wanted to save energy, and now, there was this group of people. Why did it feel like they were up to something? Besides, they had to record the people who wanted to try the game. The staff was about to head to the innermost computer to take a look. A certain Supreme Alliance fan had been here for quite some time, and it was time to record him. But just as he turned around and took a few steps inside, he was shocked. He looked up and down at the battle uniform on a certain young man with a hairband. 10,000 alpacas galloped through his heart. Wasn't this too much of a liking? He worshipped him to such an extent that he even prepared a set of battle clothes for him? This wasn't the youngster's outfit just a moment ago. When did he change into it? The staff wasn't sure what to say. The youngster even turned to glance at him. What do you think of my uniform? The staff inhaled deeply. Your cosplay isn't bad. It wasn't easy to sell a computer. Why did he have to meet all sorts of strange customers? Other than this youngster, there was a little boy around 6 years old. He insisted on playing the mobile version of Hero through the big screen. His parents were rich, they were really picky. Ever since the little boy arrived, he had been sending kills to the other side. Honestly, did he think about his teammates' feelings when he was playing like this? He even wanted to buy a big screen to play online. The staff felt a headache coming on. Bojo smiled, pulling the chair closer to the little boy. Hero. The little boy was dressed fashionably, his 2 little canine teeth exposed. He was rather aloof. MMH. He was rather serious in his game. He didn't even lift his head, his brows furrowed. He would charge forward whenever he saw someone and die without hesitation. An assassin shouldn't play like this, right? Bojo supported the side of her face with one hand, looking lazy. It wasn't possible to tell that she had been attacking the internet just a minute ago. She knew that the Almighty wouldn't be suspicious if she was in such a state. Especially since the Almighty would be here soon. Bojo's gaze dimmed. The little boy didn't lift his head. You don't understand. An assassin has to charge forward. That's how my big spade plays. Otherwise, how would he be able to cut through the enemy's backline so handsomely? Boggio. For some reason, he seemed to be right. That's why you play the assassin, because Big Spade plays the assassin. Boggio pointed to his screen. The little boy was very serious. You have to learn from your idol, the shop assistant. He really couldn't understand the world of these fans. How could they still chat when there was such a huge age gap? Alright, but I think it's better if you hide and cut the back row. It's best not to kill them when there are too many of them. They have 2 tanks and you won't be able to kill them. Do you see the bushes on your left? You can hide there, and when they run over with low HP, use your second skill to slow them down, and use your third skill to kill them instantly. After that, run back through the wilderness. The little boy was quite serious. Then teach me how to kill this mage. She's always wandering around me. It's making me dizzy. Mage. Both Boggio and the staff turned towards the ID the little boy had mentioned. In an instant, their lips froze. Chapter 851. The staff couldn't help facepalming. He finally understood why he would always lose on Saturdays. How could he not lose with such a troublesome teammate? Boggio felt that her little Spade fan was a little troublesome, but she couldn't watch as her little Spade fan died. Besides, she had to wait for the Almighty in this manner. She reached out. I'll play around, you can take a look at the controls. The little boy glanced up, sweeping a glance at Boggio's uniform. Since you're a Supreme Alliance fan like me, I'll let you play 1 round. But remember, don't rush down the tower. Boggio. It must have been tough on you to know that you can't rush down the tower. The little boy wasn't done. Where did you get your cosplay uniform? I'll get my parents to buy one for me. Is there a smaller size? The staff shrugged at Boggio. Even a child would know that she was cosplaying in that uniform. She wasn't suitable to impersonate Spadesy. Her hair wasn't even the same color. Most importantly, Spadesy's hand speed and positioning weren't something an average person could achieve. But very quickly, the staff realized that this person's maneuvering wasn't bad. For an assassin, positioning was what mattered the most. Ever since this rich second-generation young master took the phone, he took the blue beasts in passing. That wasn't all. When he swept across the middle lane, he cleared off a wave of minions. The little boy watched anxiously, reminding Boggio seriously. Team battle. You have to pay attention to team battle. The staff wanted to face bomb again. With such a huge difference in finances and attack power, how was he going to team battle? Besides, assassins were meant to fight boss to grow. Once they reached a certain level, they would be able to capture enemies with low HP and kill them instantly. No, wait a minute. Why was he criticizing such a low-end game so seriously? Even if that person's maneuvering wasn't bad, he wouldn't be able to get up. He had already killed so many times and the difference was so huge. A long-range cannon from the opponent could take away half of his HP. How was he going to fight in such a situation? Most importantly, he had to buy his computer. However, he didn't expect that he had just turned his back. A loud game sound rang in his ears. Double kill. The staff froze, turning back abruptly. Double kill. This rich second-generation cosplay killed 2 people at once? How could this be? Their lethality wasn't even on the same level. The shop assistant took 2 steps forward because he wanted to know how the other party did it. When his eyes fell on the phone screen, he only saw a pair of hands, one controlling the phone while the other didn't forget to bring up the map. Even if they were fighting in the wilderness, they still had to see who had low HP. Most importantly, he was not attacking the jungle on his side, but the blue beasts in the opponent's jungle. This is too arrogant. Hiding in the bushes to hunt in the wild. Little boy couldn't understand the secret behind it. Little boy was thinking about the team battle. He stood there and gave orders in a cute manner. Don't stay at the top lane, go to the bottom lane. Why are you going to the bottom lane? While Boggio was working, she felt that something was missing. She looked up and asked, Hey kid, do you have candy? The little boy glanced at Boggio. You can go to the bottom lane first. Why are you so fixated on the bottom lane? What exactly is there? Boggio muttered as she glided towards the bottom lane. Little boy didn't realize that the staff beside him was already in a daze. Because, that kind of hand speed, it was simply too fast. F***ck, Besides, that little B** starred was blushing at the side. After saying my classmate, she was extremely shy. Chapter 852. The shop assistant watched the little boy's expression, his lips twitching. He, it's fine if you're the one tricking him, but you even brought a girl along. That's not how you're going to court someone. In a 5v5 match, if two of the teammates were kids, F***ck, they would lose for sure. The shop assistant started to feel heartache. In the past, he couldn't win no matter how hard he fought. Bojio felt that sending the two of them together would affect their efficiency. But the little boy continued to guide her. Don't be a coward, just go. Bojio. Tell them that Lan Jiaojiao is mine. Whoever dares to touch her will be killed. The little boy saw his classmate was about to die, so he spat out these harsh words. He was still acting domineering. Bojio's fingers slipped, almost exposing herself. Mainly she was laughing. This child must have watched too many idol dramas. Kill without mercy, haha. Why aren't you going? The little boy was unhappy. Bojio lifted her lids lazily. I won't be motivated without candy. The little boy seemed to have made a huge decision. He walked towards his parents and pointed at Bojio. Dad, Mom, this brother wants candy. I'm not the one who wants it, he wants it. Bojio nodded. The little boy's parents. Bojio stilled. This little boy was caught off guard. The little boy was still muttering. This is the first time I'm seeing an adult asking for candy from a child. The little boy's parents were embarrassed. They wanted to say something. A graceful voice, with a hint of coldness in it, slowly rang out from behind the crowd. Your little brother has always been shameless. But it's my fault, I should have tied him up to prevent him from running around. The voice wasn't loud, but because it was so pleasant, it broke through the commotion. It was hard not to notice. When the shop assistant turned, he was already in a daze. This was Almighty Qin. He was so agitated he couldn't say a word. Was he going to defy the heavens today? Why was Almighty Qin here? The little boy was also a Supreme Alliance fan. Of course, they recognized Qin Mo. Their eyes were wide open and their cheeks were puffed up. It was clear that they were shocked. No one knew how long Almighty Qin had been standing there. He was wearing a black trench coat, and the hem of the coat was half open, revealing the pure white shirt and tie inside, which successfully made his legs look even more slender and powerful. His black hair made him look like a character from a manga, full of dazzling handsomeness. His eyes were long and narrow, slightly slanted, faintly emitting light. His gaze was fixed on them, and there was an indescribable meaning hidden within his indifference. In an instant, the surrounding crowd seemed to have become the background of the capital city. Many people who didn't know Qin Mo stared at the man in front of them in a daze. Their eyes followed his movements. He was so handsome. Just when the shop assistant and the others were at a loss for words, Qin Mo had already walked over. At that moment, the dim lights around them seemed to have all run into his eyes. They were like revolving diamonds, elegant and dazzling. However, those who were familiar with him knew that he wasn't in a good mood. Even the corners of his lips were lifted, sending a message. For example, how was he going to deal with the faintly smiling fellow in front of him? Chapter 853. Even though Bojio didn't know what the Almighty was thinking, she could sense the aura emanating from him. How should she put it? It was extremely cold. She didn't have to think to know. She wouldn't have a good ending. Even if she had thought of a follow-up, it wouldn't be useful in the Almighty's eyes. But at this moment, she had to maintain her aura. She couldn't lose in this aspect. After all, she was so handsome and aggressive. Bojio stood up, asking despite knowing the answer. There was a hint of surprise in her voice. Brother Mo, why are you here? Are you here to buy a computer as well? Qin Mo just looked at her, his gaze deep like a handsome detective interrogating a criminal in the police station. Especially with his clothes, he looked more like a famous criminal scientist from the movies. Bojio seemed to have realized something, reaching out to caress her headband. She smiled brightly. I just got a new hairstyle. Brother Mo, what do you think? Does it look good? When did you put on your uniform? Qin Mo didn't waste his breath. helping her up. He tugged on the youngster's collar, his gaze moving downwards. Those who weren't in the know would have assumed they were about to fight. But in reality, Bojo was the only one who knew the Almighty was checking if she was wearing any other uniform. Bojo definitely wouldn't leave behind such evidence. She smiled. It seems like Brother Mo picked up my jacket. I feel like I'm missing something if I'm only wearing pants. Chin Mo arched a brow, retracting his gaze from the smooth fair skin. The natural pressure was so piercing that it made his scalp go numb. Neither of them averted their gazes. One was elegant and handsome while the other was devilishly handsome. The crime squad watched from the side, feeling an indescribable aura. The shop assistant's mouth was wide open, so wide that half of his fist could be stuffed inside. Chin Mo didn't reply, pressing the earpiece on his left ear. His voice was calm. Fatty. Yes, young master, I've been following your instructions. The expert hasn't left yet. He's still at the cafe on the second floor. His account is still online and he's clearing the virus quickly. Hearing this, Chin Mo frowned. He turned to look at the guy whose smile was getting brighter. At that moment, Bojo had a thought in her mind. Almighty Fatty was like a godly assistant to her. When the team gathered for dinner, she would make him drink a few more bottles. No one dared to approach such an atmosphere. But the crime squad was anxious. The main thing was that they didn't quite understand why the expert suddenly stopped when he said he was going to arrest someone. The frozen atmosphere lasted for a few seconds. Chin Mo said slowly to the little boy. Other than shamelessly asking for candy from you, what else did this little brother do? Bojo. She had underestimated the Almighty's poisonous tongue. Little boy was quite loyal at this time. He helped me play the game, but he's too stubborn and never listens to my commands. Bojo glanced sideways at the shop assistant beside her. With that excuse, those who didn't know better would think that she was the one who was going to die. Chin Mo followed the youngster's gaze. When he saw the uniformed staff, he lowered his voice even further. What about before the game? Chapter 854. With that, Bojo's eyes dimmed. The staff didn't seem to notice. Which one? Chin Mo asked unhurriedly, as though he was having a casual chat. But Bojo knew it wasn't a casual chat. Every question of the Almighty was straight to the point. This way. The staff moved aside so that Almighty Chin could see the computer. Chin Mo swept the person in front of him a glance before walking over to sit in front of the computer. His fingers glided across the light emitted by the mechanical keyboard. With a shake of the mouse, Hero's page appeared on the screen. His fingers stilled when he saw the page. With a few quick movements, he closed the page and found the computer's D drive. Even though Chin Mo wasn't a hacker, he wasn't a computer noob either. Regardless of the type of network attack, there would be traces left on the system drive. However, what made him squint was that this computer's D drive was very clean. Bojo stood behind Chin Mo. A hint of playfulness in her smile. Brother Mo, you think this computer is good too? The keyboard is good, should we buy one? Chin Mo turned back to look at her and smiled. He reached out and pressed her head down. Well done. Bojo arched a brow, feigning confusion. There wasn't a hint of warmth in the Almighty's eyes. It was obvious that it wasn't a compliment. Let's go. Instead of asking for candy from a kid, why don't you think about how you're going to talk to me later, young lady? Chin Mo lowered his voice ringing beside her ear, the coolness of his thin lips extremely close to hers. Bojo stilled, lifting her lids. *T. She had been thinking about how to escape and had forgotten about this. Their posture was already ambiguous. Now that Chin Mo sat on the seat and asked the youngster to bend over, he turned his head and said something to her. The staff was completely dumbfounded. The crime squad didn't know where to look. Bojo maintained her gentlemanly demeanor, allowing them to size her up as she thought about how to avoid a certain conversation that night. But the Almighty's suspicions weren't over. How long has she been using this computer? Chin Mo asked the staff again. The shop assistant was a little confused. He usually hung around the internet, so he knew that the hottest couple in esports was Almighty Chin and Spadesy. Now it looked at how familiar Almighty Chin was with this rich young master cosplaying. Could it be? that he was really from Supreme Alliance. The shop assistant didn't react in time, and was shocked by Almighty Chin's sudden appearance. Now calm down. It was as if the entire computer had been struck by lightning. After all, only Spadesy could make Almighty Chin act like this. It was no wonder that the person took the little boy's phone and made a double kill. For Spadesy, in such a low-end game, if it wasn't for the huge financial disparity, he could have killed 5 times without a problem. The main thing was that he had never seen anyone praise themselves like that in front of outsiders. The staff didn't forget that the second rich kid had said something along the lines of "Spadesy is handsome" when he had first arrived. He had thought he was a fan. How could he have known that he just wanted to praise himself? Chinemo looked into the wavering eyes of the staff and asked again, "How long has she been using this computer?" "Ah." The staff snapped back to his senses. "More than 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Chinmo's eyes dimmed as he looked at the youngster. "You like it that much?" Bojio replied, "The images are smooth." Chinemo arched a brow. "Oh," he continued, "bring it to the police station and study it slowly." Chapter 855. He hadn't switched off his earphones when he said the last sentence. Almost everyone on the other side could hear this conversation. Fatty finally understood what was going on. Boss had gone to catch Little Spade. But what did that have to do with him monitoring the internet? Did Boss suspect that Little Spade was that defensive expert? Fatty bolted up in agitation. Just as the others were lamenting their boss's shameless actions, Fatty was the only one scratching and scratching, feeling a little itchy. The little boy was still watching from the side. Honestly, he was shocked as well. From the looks of Almighty Chin and the little brother who had insisted on playing for him, it was highly possible that it was his idol, Big Spade. But the little brother hadn't even said the harsh words he had asked him to say, and was just playing in the jungle instead of saving his beloved little girl. What should he do now to show his admiration for Big Spade, and at the same time remind him not to be so willful? He was in a dilemma. The little boy frowned and exhaled solemnly. "Big Spade, I don't have any sweets. You should leave with Almighty Chin. He has already taken your computer away. He won't let you off." Bojio turned and tugged on the little boy's cap. "What are you saying?" Chinemo had said that he would have to pay to take the computer away. He turned and watched the two of them whispering into each other's ears. He arched a brow. "Come over." She didn't need to think to know who he was talking to. Bojio adjusted her headband. Indeed, she was eye-catching. "Are we going to the police station?" "I don't think I need to go. There's a competition tomorrow afternoon. I want to clear a dungeon and practice my positioning." "Where did you get the confidence that you don't need to go?" Chinmo's gaze swept over the youngster's hair. His voice was calm, but it gave off an invisible chill. "Give up on your shameful behavior of cheating children of candy. Until the competition, you can only be with me. It's reasonable for me to ask for sweets. I killed 2 people for him. If Brother Emo hadn't come, I could have saved his beloved little girl. It's a pity." Actually, when she said that, she knew that the Almighty's main point was the second half of his sentence. Before the competition, you can only be with me. Was the Almighty really going to lock her up for a day? The Almighty wouldn't really lock her up for a day, right? Bojio scanned the port. Her left hand in her pocket tightened. When Bojio scanned the port, her left hand in her pocket tightened. But if the other computer crashed, it would disappear automatically. However, if the other computer system crashes, it should automatically disappear. Chinemo paused and glanced at her. "Is it very honorable to ask a child for candy?" "Bojio. Shouldn't everything she said be to pave the way for the future?" "Come over," Chinemo said in a low voice. Bojio knew that he was already there, but since her puppy had said so, she still inched closer. When her right hand was held, Bojio froze, her heart sinking. She glanced at his chiseled face. But it was still there. The Almighty was only holding her hand. She thought the USB in her hand had been discovered. Chapter 856. Bojio glanced up, a mischievous expression on her face. "I'm embarrassed." How was she embarrassed? Chinemo arched a brow. tugging her away from the little boy. His stance wasn't one to be trifled with. Perhaps he was the only one who knew how important it was that the fellow in front of him was still in his hands. She hadn't expected him to be afraid. He was afraid that it would be too late, afraid that he wouldn't be able to see her face anywhere. That was crazy. Chinemo glanced over at Bojio. Bojio sighed inwardly. He was still angry. She knew it wasn't easy to coax a puppy. It had been the same when she had been young. He had been cold and aloof. But shouldn't he like the evidence that she had sent to the crime squad? Sigh. His thoughts were hard to read. She felt that it would be a waste of her brain cells to play psychological warfare with the Almighty. Just as she was about to sigh, a lollipop was thrown over. Bojio threw a lollipop over. It was a familiar brand, her favorite flavor, mixed with the unique smell of tobacco. Bojio opened it with a smile, placing it in her mouth. Coupled with her black headband, it was a delightful sight. Chinemo didn't say anything, tightening his grip on her left hand. After seeing this scene, the shop assistant and the little boy could still look at each other, and then turn their heads to gossip. However, the members of the Major Crimes Division following behind them could only watch with their heads lowered. No one could figure out what was going on. More importantly, the young expert didn't head straight to the parking lot. Instead, he headed to the coffee shop on the second floor. There was a brand new laptop by the window, the screen lit up and running. Fatty felt that he had to inform his boss over the phone. Young master, that expert just now shouldn't be Little Spade. Little Spade has been caught by you, but the defense system is still clearing the virus. From the time and floor, it doesn't match up. Chinemo didn't say much, replying faintly, "Got it." He hung up, his long fingers caressing the edge of the laptop. It was still warm. He asked casually, "What do you think of this laptop?" It was obvious who he was asking. Bojio arched a brow, smiling faintly. "The quality isn't bad, it's suitable for research in the police station." With the help of the lollipop, her thoughts became much clearer. Very few people knew. What was the reason she ate sweets? In fact, after the large-scale network defense, she absolutely needed to supplement these things, otherwise her thinking would become sluggish. On top of that, the battle of wits and courage with the Almighty had consumed a lot of brain power. That was why she wanted to eat something. Scientific research shows, the more you work with your brain, the more sugar you need. Just like how a certain lawyer loved desserts, it was the same logic. However, because of this, that was when Bojio realized a problem. If she knew this kind of research data, it was impossible for the Almighty not to know. Why did she feel like the lollipop in her mouth was something the Almighty used to test her? Young Master Chin. Looking at the computer, the crime squad member suddenly realized something. Something's up. Chinemo lowered his eyes in the direction he was pointing at. His dark eyes swept across the screen, his emotions indifferent. Chapter 857. The crime squad couldn't understand. But that didn't mean Chinemo couldn't either. His gaze deepened. Send a group of people to the internet cafe to understand the situation. Find out which computer is broken today, and who is using it. Bring the surveillance footage from 5 to 7 to the team. The rest of you follow me. The rest of them, obviously included Bojio. Sitting in a police car in such a manner. Bojio had never thought about it in the past. Beside her was the Almighty. He seemed to be resting with his eyes closed. But that was all. When the city lights hit the car window, the Almighty spoke again. The Almighty spoke again. "When did you dye your hair?" Bojio was watertight. "I didn't dye it, it's a one-time bleaching spray. It's good, silver hair looks weird with a headband, black hair isn't bad." "Is that so?" Chinemo opened his eyes. Wrapped in the lights and the shadows of the car, his handsome face and beautiful smile were really dazzling. Bojio wasn't bewitched by his beauty. Usually, when the Almighty said that, it meant he didn't believe her. As expected, the Almighty's next action was to swipe open his phone and pull up a video. "Do you recognize it?" Bojio glanced at the ticketing staff. It was clearly her, but at this moment, she would be stupid to admit it. "Brother Mo, who are you talking about?" "The ticketing staff that has gotten fatter." Chinemo fiddled with his lighter, a cold smile on his face. Bojio. What did he mean by fatter? I don't know him. Chin Emo arched a brow. Bojio assumed that was the end of the conversation. Unexpectedly, the Almighty leaned forward, his voice calm as he glided past her ear. Are you going to tell me the truth after I strip you naked? Bojio stilled, the tips of her ears flushing. When Chin Emo saw this scene, he was angry and wanted to break this guy's claws. In the end, he didn't do either. Instead, he took advantage of the hazy night sky to press his lips against her flushed ears. Since she liked to wear uniforms so much, he would let her wear them to her heart's content. Of course, Bojio could feel the kiss. Even though it was light, it sent a shiver down her spine. Then, she looked at that handsome face that could bring disaster to everything in the shadow of the car. Try kissing me again. Bojio thought to herself. If I kiss you again, I'll immediately carry you away. Unfortunately, the Almighty didn't receive her message. Furrowing his brows, he ran his fingers through her hair. Don't spray something like that in the future. It smells weird. Bojio. When the Almighty wasn't speaking, his face was rather handsome, but the moment he spoke, it was infuriating. 2 members of the Major Crimes Unit were sitting in front of the police car. He couldn't wait for these 2 lovebirds to get out of the back seat. But he could only think about it. Fortunately, it wasn't far from the police station. About 10 minutes later, Chin Emo alighted first. Bojio didn't really want to go. It wouldn't be good for a hacker like her to watch the police work. Unfortunately, even if she wanted to wait outside, the Almighty wouldn't give her the chance. It was a sign that the Almighty's suspicions towards her hadn't disappeared. Brother Emo, even if I didn't accept the private interview after the competition, you don't have to cuff me, right? Bojio glanced down at the handcuffs on her wrists. What? You don't like it? Chin Emo tilted his head and glanced at her. How should she put it? Bojio felt that if she said she didn't like it, the Almighty would use other methods to deal with her. It's fine after a while. Chapter 858. There weren't many who entered the crime squad in such a manner. Director Huang coughed heavily when he caught sight of the person Chin Emo was handcuffed to. He thought to himself, if you want to date, then go ahead. Why do you have to come to the police station? Weren't you supposed to be the interrogator? Was this how you interrogated the case? Director Huang wanted to facepalm. She was really born with a silver spoon in her mouth, and yet, she was still so high profile. Where's Yu Hongliang? One of Chin Mo's hands was cuffed to Bojio's, the other stuffed into his pocket. It didn't affect his noble aura at all. As a bureau chief, Director Huang had to maintain his composure. Interrogation room 2. He glanced at the youngster in his hands, meaning, you're not letting him stay? Chin Mo replied nonchalantly, he's a suspect as well, we'll interrogate him together. Director Huang. What kind of lousy reason was that? The youngster smiled, revealing her canine teeth. Do you have a packed lunch? I heard the crime squad treats suspects well. Director Huang's chest heaved. They had a free meal the last time. Again. Fortunately, Chin Mo was still rational and didn't agree to his request. But his next sentence made Director Huang curse. After the interrogation, let's go for lobster. Director Huang will be treating. Director Huang. When did he say he would be treating? The youngster sighed. Little Huang is so generous. Chin Mo didn't even lift his head. One of the few good points. Director Huang. These two were going back and forth, making his treat a reality. How shameless. Besides, what was up with the nickname Little Huang? The crime squad's officers were perceptive, comforting their director. Calm down, calm down. Think about the time given by the higher-ups. Director Huang took a deep breath, heading towards interrogation hall 2. Yu Hongliang came from a wealthy family and was knowledgeable about the law. Even if they found out he was the culprit, he just slept with someone and wouldn't be held responsible. They could only detain him for 24 hours. After that, they would have to release him. Besides, he had connections. Kacha. The door to the interrogation room was pushed open. Yu Hongliang reached out instinctively, shielding his eyes. Then he sneered and sat there as if he wasn't afraid of anything. The man had already thought of what he would say after he was caught. He was just using it in advance. Director Huang was an experienced police officer. With one look at the other party's attitude, he knew the interrogation wouldn't be simple. No wonder Qin Mo said to let him do the interrogation. Yu Hongliang casually crossed his legs. In his heart, he knew that the police would not be able to hold themselves back from asking him questions. However, the two people sitting in front of him were sitting more steadily than him. One was lying there with a lollipop in his mouth, and the other was lighting a cigarette. Their hands were handcuffed together. What the hell was going on? Ever since Yu Hongliang was diagnosed with AIDS, he had lost a lot of his patience, and his favorite thing to do was to smoke. He couldn't help but clench his fists as he stared at his opponent. What was going on with these two people? Interrogate him. About 10 minutes later, Qin Mo extinguished the cigarette, his voice calm. Mr. Yu seems to be in a hurry. That's right, a terminally ill person doesn't have much time to waste. Bojiu sat at the side, watching as Yu Hongliang clenched his teeth, unable to say a word. They all sighed. A single sentence was able to hit the person's sore spot. Chapter 859. It was impossible for Yu Hongliang not to be infuriated. Especially when he caught sight of Qin Mo's face, his face contorted. Officer, be careful of your interrogation methods. With that, Bojiu tilted her head. She had one thought. This suspect was doomed. If he used another method, he wouldn't be able to take it. Look, I'm a realistic example. Qin Mo arched a brow. He took out his phone and turned it over for Yu Hongliang to look at the screen. I would like to hear Mr. Yu's explanation. Yu Hongliang snorted at first, but when he saw the words that appeared, his expression changed. How was that possible? How did he have it? That person had sent him the exact same message. How was that possible? A person like Yu Hongliang would never have guessed that there were some geniuses like Qin Mo who could memorize the attributes of every hero in a game. He could even calculate the time it took for the heroes to recover their skills. It was a message with only a few words. Of course, Qin Mo remembered it. Bojiu understood since the Almighty often used such things to bluff her. He had even shown her the video. It was the same logic. The Almighty had been playing mind games from the start. As expected, when Yu Hongliang saw the contents of the message, he panicked. He glanced left and right, feeling extremely uneasy. However, he continued to be stubborn. What a joke, I'm just asking someone out. What's the point of explaining? Qin Mo held a cigarette between his fingers, his voice cold. My language isn't good, but I can recognize the words on the screen. The police wouldn't have time to deal with an ordinary person, but this is premeditated and organized. It doesn't seem as simple as an appointment. First, I didn't kill anyone. Second, I didn't commit arson. I never forced anyone to have sex with me. Every single one of those women was willing. Just because of that, they arrested me and charged me with organized crime. Is this how the police handle cases? Yu Hongliang turned his head away, refusing to communicate with the police. Qin Mo sized him up. Indeed, you can't kill them. Mr. Yu doesn't seem to understand AIDS well enough. Do you think anyone infected with AIDS will die? Medical science isn't that outdated. Those who deserve to die will die, and those who don't will live well. Yu Hongliang, who had always been filled with hostility, gripped the edge of the table when he heard this. What did this policeman mean? Was he implying that his actions were useless? How could this be? All right, the interrogation is almost done. Qin Mo turned his head and asked the person handcuffed to him, shall we go? Leaving just like that? The crime squad members sitting outside were just about to push the door open. Director Huang stopped him. Let's take a look. The suspect's emotional state was obviously different from before. Was this Qin Mo's interrogation method? No. It should be said that this was the interrogation method of a genius criminologist. If the crime squad members were surprised to hear that Qin Mo was leaving, they wouldn't be able to control themselves. When Yu Hongliang heard that the other party wanted to leave, he could no longer contain his anger. Speak clearly. What do you mean by only those who deserve to die will die, and those who don't deserve to die will live well? Qin Mo leaned back nonchalant. Mr. Yu, can't you understand the literal meaning? Chapter 860. Director Huang narrowed his eyes, his beer belly sticking out, looking just like a minion. Bojiu glanced at Yu Hongliang's expression and pressed the record button. The main event was about to begin. As expected, after a long period of psychological stimulation, the Almighty poured oil on Yu Hongliang. In the end, he took a puff of his cigarette and poured the last bit of fuel on Yu Hongliang. Mr. Yu's first crime was committed by a university student. After a medical examination, he received timely treatment. The early stages of AIDS were well controlled, so he could still continue living. Although it's a little inconvenient, for a patient like Mr. Yu, who is in the late stages of AIDS, he shouldn't be able to live for long. Before he could finish his sentence, Yu Hongliang couldn't hold it in, punching the table heavily. Those greedy girls who should have died in the sewers, how could they be alive? That's impossible. That's impossible. Just you wait, when their illness acts up, I'll see how they're going to cling on to others. By then, their entire bodies will be covered in pustules. The mere sight of them will be disgusting. His voice was loud, so loud that it echoed throughout the interrogation room. It wasn't a lot of words, but it exposed the suspect's thoughts. The crime squad's record taker looked at Qin Mo with a completely different gaze. Qin Mo only asked, "Is the recording done?" Bojiu smiled. Of course. Her and the Almighty's speculations were between the two of them. Their relationship was the same. Without a tacit understanding, how could they work together? The moment Yu Hongliang heard the word recording, his face fell. That was when he realized he had said the wrong thing. But it was useless. Qin Mo stood up, stuffing the cigarette in the ashtray. His voice wasn't loud, but his words were precise. It's going to be hard to deny the fact that you admitted your intention to kill. It's a pity that Mr. Yu wanted to find loopholes in the law. Yu Hongliang was so angry that even the rhythm of his breathing changed. His chest heaved up and down. He really wanted to kill someone. The youngster added, "You thought you could escape after killing someone, but not only did you fail to escape, you didn't even manage to kill the person you wanted to kill. Your criminal skills aren't that good, brother." Who the F***ck was your brother? Yu Hongliang wanted to stand up, but his wrists were locked. He could only remain on the chair, displaying his anger. He had never expected such an outcome. The system in this area was clearly incomplete. And those people, were they really not dead? The thing that Yu Hongliang couldn't accept the most was that he would die alone. Bojiu was clear that the Almighty had seen through this, which was why he had given Yu Hongliang a psychological hint from the start. However, Yu Hongliang's mental endurance was too weak. There's a needle mark on his arm. Qin Mo saw that the guy beside him looked like there was something wrong with him, so he reminded him in a calm voice. Bojiu had an epiphany. No wonder he was a drug addict. People who were drug addicts tended to get emotional easily, especially after being locked up. They would feel a sense of urgency that they couldn't control themselves. However, Brother Mo, when did you notice that there was a needle mark on his arm? That guy's sleeve had been open all this time. Qin Mo glanced sideways. His handsome face was chiseled, but he remained nonchalant. When he waved his fist at me in the theater. Chapter 861. Qin Mo bore a grudge. But it had nothing to do with the other party. It had something to do with the other party delaying his arrest. Director Huang watched the scene through the glass, heaving a sigh of relief. Why was there so much pressure and attention on this case? It was because there was a possibility that they wouldn't be able to punish the culprit. For a long time, dealing with suspects who were infected with AIDS had been a huge challenge for the Public Security Department. If the suspect didn't admit to it, they wouldn't be able to pin the crime on him. This was a country ruled by law. But there were some things that weren't allowed from a moral point of view. Yet some people would still do it. They would take harming others for granted. Now there was a solution. They would let the culprit get what he deserved. As an experienced detective, he would be at ease. Perhaps, this was the reason why Qin Mo had been helping Director Huang. No matter how much he looked like a corrupt official, He was indeed a police officer who cared about the people. Director Huang, the higher-ups are calling, asking for our results. Director Huang inhaled deeply, changing his expression to deal with the higher-ups. Yes, the evidence has been found and we are continuing with the investigation on Z. Hand it over to someone else? Why? The people at the side saw the change in Director Huang's expression and realized something was wrong. Z's case can't be dragged on any longer. I will send a criminal expert to you. As for young Master Qin, he has been away for 3 years. We aren't sure if he can make accurate judgments. This expert is from America and has interacted with Z in the past. He might be able to help with the case. I know you have been trying to get Qin Mo back all these years. Back then, he had indeed achieved something no one could achieve. But old Huang, are you sure nothing will happen to him? Has he regained all his memories? He is General Qin's son, who will be responsible if anything happens. Director Huang knew everything else was bullsh*t. The main point was the criminal expert that the higher-ups had sent over. But even if he knew he couldn't do anything, he had to listen to the higher-ups. After hanging up, Director Huang wanted to smoke, but the moment he turned around, he realized that the 2 men were standing behind him. Their expressions were the same. They had obviously heard his low growl. Director Huang explained, "There will be another criminal psychologist who will be working with us. He's from America and is said to have crossed hands with Z before. He's really good and should be your helper." Director Huang couldn't believe his own words. It was obvious that someone at the top wanted to improve their performance, so they sent someone over. Damn it. Qin Mo glanced at him but didn't ask anything else. Bojiu chuckled. He had fought her before. Apart from the Almighty, those who had fought with her seemed to have been tortured badly by her. The key case investigation unit was really interesting. They didn't use a top-notch expert like the Almighty, but they had to use an outsider. Was he trying to be more of a hindrance? Qin Mo was looking at the information in his hands. He glanced up and caught sight of a certain someone's smile. What has this got to do with you? Why are you so happy? Chapter 862. Qin Mo couldn't be bothered with such excuses as none of them were true. Director Huang didn't take it seriously, continuing to explain to Bojiu. Let me put it this way, those criminal experts might sound good but they aren't as good as your brother Mo. They aren't as good looking as my brother Mo, Bojiu added. It was obvious who she was referring to. Qin Mo stopped reading the information and turned his gaze over. Bojiu arched a brow, filled with confidence. Qin Mo capped his pen. Why are you so sure? Have you seen him before? Bojiu. How could he trick her like that? The Almighty was really invincible. Qin Mo is the only beauty in the world. That was what Qin Mo's fans often said on his official Weibo. She sure remembered it well. Qin Mo's gaze softened, his aura not as cold as before. Director Huang gritted his teeth. Why did he have to sit there and listen to them flaunting their affection? Weren't they talking about the crime experts? Qin Mo lifted his lids. Are all the people in the theater here? The seats you mentioned should have all of them. Director Huang caressed his face. I've questioned them just now. They are all here for the movie, nothing out of the ordinary. We can only release them. You should be aware that such suspicions aren't enough to arrest them. Qin Mo remained silent, his gaze pausing when he reached the 4th last name. Raorong? What is it? Is there a problem? Director Huang's eyes lit up. Qin Mo replied calmly, no, it's an esports player. Oh right, there's indeed an esports player here. He was just taken away by his teammate. Say, aren't esports players all on good terms? Director Huang's eyes were filled with envy. Qin Mo frowned, not saying a word. On the other hand, Bojiu's gaze never left Raorong's name. It was him again. It was such a coincidence that he appeared with the suspect in the theater? Send someone to follow them. Qin Mo would never abandon his original plan just because he knew someone. That had always been his habit. Tell me if there's a problem. I'll definitely tell you, mainly because no one knows what you're thinking, Director Huang replied. The person who had gone to the internet cafe to investigate rushed back anxiously. Director Huang, there's a situation. There's a situation? What's going on? Little Huang still didn't know about the investigation. Qin Mo stood up. Speak. The computers in the internet cafe are indeed broken. And it's not just the computers that are broken. Even the surveillance cameras are gone for some reason. However, according to the owner of the internet cafe, something strange happened today. At first, the motherboard of one of the computers was burned, and then a sentence popped up on the screens of several computers. What are you talking about? Forgive Minion for being too eager to solve the case. The man took a sip of water. Is it fun? I'm asking you a question and you're telling me if it's fun. Director Huang was furious and the consequences were dire. He paused. Director Huang, I meant the words written on the screen. Is it fun? The minion quietened down and coughed heavily. Qin Mo's voice was low. Who is using that computer? Do you have any impression of the internet cafe? Chapter 863. Qin Mo put down the information in his hands. Call the boss over and get him to describe everything he remembers. Then get the restoration artist to restore the face to a certain extent. There should be some differences. He scratched his head. The boss only has a rough idea. Qin Mo stood up. It should be a clue. Send it to me. Director Huang couldn't understand. Why are you so fixated on a girl from the internet cafe? Fixated. Qin Mo seemed to be against the word, his voice calm. It's just because she's the mastermind behind the case. I'm just investigating. When Director Huang heard the word mastermind, his face was filled with shock. You're saying Shishi? Qin Mo's gaze remained noble. Is it weird? Nope. Director Huang scratched his head. But she just went online. How can you be so sure she is the mastermind? Qin Mo tapped the handcuffs, signaling for a certain someone to stand up. Because just now someone hunted her. Hunted her? What do you mean? Why am I getting confused? Poor Director Huang, he was already a middle-aged man but he was still losing his hair over such matters. Qin Mo didn't have the slightest interest in answering her questions. His cold voice sounded perfunctory. Then you can sort it out yourself. With that he arched a brow. You want to stay in the police station? Bojio did want to stay there, but given the current situation, staying in the police station would be safer than following the Almighty. Director Huang wasn't going to let them leave without an answer. No, you have to tell me. I won't be able to sleep if you don't. Why do you think the computers in the internet cafe were broken? A few computers were malfunctioning at the same time. And only the words "is it fun?" Qin Mo didn't want to beat around the bush. It was an internet attack. Director Huang was still confused. Who would be so bored as to attack an internet cafe? Bojio wanted to say something. What did he mean by being bored? Didn't he understand? More importantly, this was the second gift she was giving the Almighty. The Almighty shouldn't be so angry anymore. For example, the overbearing CEO buying a bag. Buying one might not be enough to settle his little lover. Buying two would definitely be enough. I have to say, in some aspects, my position as Jio is indeed wrong. Qin Mo swept her a glance before turning to Director Huang. Today, the mastermind tried to attack the core network of the commercial center. Once the network goes down, the entire commercial center will be in a state of chaos. Even I can't guarantee that everyone will be able to calm down. An expert managed to break through the attack and track down the location of the mastermind. This was the first time Bojio found the Almighty's words pleasing to the ear. Director Huang was righteous at times. We should thank the expert properly. You might not say that now that you know who that person is. Qin Mo's voice was calm. Director Huang was insistent. Regardless of who it is, the person who saved everyone should be thanked. Really? Qin Mo turned, his deep eyes looking into Director Huang's. In that instant, his eyes were as deep as the sea, making it hard to read his emotions. Chapter 864. What did you say? At that moment, Director Huang started to suspect that there was something wrong with his hearing. The members of the Major Crimes Division were also stunned. But none of them were as shocked as Bojio herself. She tried her best to look natural. But her heartbeat wouldn't lie. Did the Almighty already know it was her or? Qin Mo's gaze didn't waver. That person is Z. Director Huang was confused. He spun around. No, you mean Z protected the entire mall, defending against an attack? Qin Mo replied faintly. Director Huang scratched his head. Such a situation. How is that possible? Why is it not possible? Qin Mo lifted his brows. Director Huang was frustrated. Let me think this through. Didn't you just say that the person behind the attack was the mastermind behind the series of cases? Now you're saying that Z was the one who defended the network. Are you trying to say that Z isn't the person we're trying to arrest? I reminded you. Qin Mo's expression didn't change. Director Huang inhaled deeply, not saying a word. After all, it wasn't easy for him to thank a criminal. Besides, he was in a mess. Why was Qin Mo still speaking up for Z? He knew Qin Mo all too well. If it was a criminal he truly hated, he wouldn't be acting in such a manner. Director Huang paused. When he turned towards Qin Mo, there was a never-before-seen worry in his eyes. You are still the same towards Z. Qin Mo, regardless of how much you treat Z as a hero, Z is still a criminal, do you understand? Qin Mo's face remained emotionless. Let's talk about how you are going to thank me. Director Huang choked, calming down. At this moment, Qin Mo moved his left hand. Bo Jiu arched a brow. Go. It seemed like the Almighty hadn't guessed it was her, and was probably still doubting. But it wasn't bad to hear such an evaluation. In the past, the Almighty hadn't been so resistant towards her. A hero cherished a hero. It was the same for the Almighty. There had never been anyone who had caught her that she would want to bring home. But the Almighty's next sentence, Bo Jiu's heart skipped a beat, her movements stilling. As for the fact that she is a criminal, I know it better than anyone else. Bo Jiu tilted her head, her black hair falling over her eyes. She was also very clear about this. That was why they couldn't kidnap him and bring him home to raise him. Because that person was the Almighty. If they fought, both sides would be injured. On the other hand, the key case investigation unit still needed time to digest the news they had heard. In particular, how to report to the higher-ups was a very important matter. Director Huang knew that Qin Mo was bringing this matter to the surface to clear Z's name since the higher-ups had transferred the case. Director Huang understood some of the matters. Naturally, Bo Jiu understood. If she meant if the two of them were not in such a position. Perhaps she and the Almighty could really be heroes. But that would never happen. She's Z. Is born black. Behind her, there was still something she had to protect. Just like behind the Almighty, there was someone he had to protect. It began to rain outside the police station. Chapter 865. At 9:15 p.m., there were fewer people on the streets due to the rain. At the entrance of the police station, Qin Mo held a black umbrella over her head. His face was noble and gentle in the rain. There was already a car waiting in the drizzle. It was a black Land Rover with a red military license plate. Under normal circumstances, it carried a strong aura. Young master. The Qin family's chauffeur was as thoughtful as ever, bringing an extra umbrella over. But when he saw Qin Mo and Bo Jiu's handcuffed hands, he was startled. Qin Mo's expression didn't change. Other than raising his hand to wipe the rainwater off the youngster's face, his voice was calm. Let's go. Bo Jiu was still deep in thought. The computer she had brought back couldn't produce any results in a short period of time. Fatty couldn't do anything about it, so she had to find someone more professional. Bo Jiu wasn't worried about them finding anything since the other system had already crashed. In another half an hour, the remaining traces would be destroyed as well. This showdown would depend on how much the Almighty suspected her. Qin Mo sat at the side, his gaze landing on the youngster's headband. He asked slowly, "Have you thought of a way to talk?" With that, Bo Jiu snapped out of her daze. She had been worried about many things, but none of them could compare to the situation in front of her. The Almighty wanted to talk to her. She wasn't sure if she could jump out of the car in time. Bo Jiu shook the handcuffs on her right hand. It was obvious she wouldn't make it in time since the chauffeur was still heading towards the military compound. He had no intention of letting her go. Chin Emo glanced over, supporting his face with one hand as he watched her. He even tapped her wrist with an enigmatic smile. That pressure was indescribable. It felt as though her right hand would break at any moment. But it still looked good. Bojio felt that the Almighty was so likable because of his good looks. She sorted out her thoughts, but before she could speak, the Almighty's voice came again. The Almighty's voice came again very slowly. There's something I'm curious about. The first time we met, you said you wanted to compete in size with me. How are you going to compete in size with me? In that instant, Bojio's words were stuck in her throat. The chauffeur couldn't understand his young master. As the person involved, Bojio understood. Back then, when she had pinned the Almighty against the wall, she hadn't thought much about it in order to keep her identity a secret. I'm young and inexperienced. Bojio felt that it wasn't a good time to talk about such a sensitive topic. But obviously, Chin Emo didn't think so. The police station was not far from the military compound. Now that they were in the garage, Chin Emo lifted his lids and said to the driver in the driver's seat, "Old Wang, go in first." Old Wang knew that young master had something private to discuss with young master Fu. He didn't turn off the heater, so he opened the door and got out of the car. Now, only the two of them were left in the cabin of the Land Rover. It was rare for Bojio to feel that the situation wasn't easy to handle. As soon as Old Wang left, the pressure from the Almighty became even stronger. Just because you're young and inexperienced, you think you can flirt and not take responsibility? Chin Emo lifted the corner of his eyes. It seems like as a young girl, the wall-jumping scholar, your understanding of this is biased. Bojio knew that she wasn't strong in this aspect, hence, she decided to take the initiative. Brother Emo, you can ask me why I dressed as a man. Coincidentally, I'm not interested in reasons, Chin Emo said slowly. His side profile was handsome as if it had been carved by a knife. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.